Hey everyone, Attorney Davis Younts here. Listen, I wanted to talk for a few minutes about an important piece of news as it relates to religious freedom and free speech. Now, you may have missed this story. Something significant happened on the 8th of July, and it relates to a provision of the tax code called the Johnson Amendment. So here's what the Johnson Amendment is. We'll talk about that real quick, and then we'll talk about what happened. So in 1954, Lyndon Baines Johnson was a senator before he was president, and there was a provision put in the tax code as it relates to 501c3 nonprofit tax-exempt organizations. And what this amendment did is put limitations on what nonprofits were allowed to do with regard to specific political activities related to endorsing a specific candidate or campaigning against a specific candidate. And it also has, broader implications related to political parties and particular actions on behalf of specific legislations. Really a lot of broad discretion for the IRS to go after these organizations and try to take their tax-exempt status as a means of punishment. During the Obama administration, we saw the IRS specifically target and go after conservative or perceived conservative nonprofit groups using this and other provisions of the tax code to go after them. So why is this a big deal and why does it matter? Well, it's the Johnson Amendment that has been used as an excuse by many churches and many pastors to muzzle political free speech in the church. In other words, many churches, many pastors have hid behind this rule to say, well, we can't talk about those things because we could risk losing our tax-exempt status under 501c3. Now, my position on this issue for a long time has been that to me is very, very scary. First of all, our nation has a long tradition going all the way back to the Black Robe Regiment before the American Revolutionary War of pastors playing a critical role in talking about issues that impact society, to impact their people, their communities, their church, their nation from a biblical perspective. Pastors should not be remaining silent on issues that are a question of biblical truth and biblical law when it comes to society, because chaos ensues, and the only thing that people in our society and people in our churches will hear will be the secular, the worldly, the ungodly view if pastors aren't talking about these issues. So I have said for a long time, no pastor should be muzzling themselves. No pastor should be stepping into a pulpit, living in fear and afraid that the government is somehow going to censor what they're saying. And if a pastor is holding back and not teaching on something, not talking about something because of that fear, I think that's wrong. And churches should not be so married to our 501c3 tax-exempt status that we would allow ourselves to be muzzled or remain silent out of fear. Now, that said, that's the background for this. What happened on the 8th of July? What happened is there is now a proposed settlement in a case in federal court involving the national religious broadcasters as well as two large churches in Texas. The settlement in that case is the IRS is agreeing to settle that case by not enforcing the Johnson Amendment against the national religious broadcasters or those two churches for anything they say related to a specific candidate or political party, as long as it is talked about through their religious lens, consistent with their statement of faith and the religious purposes of the organization. In other words, if they have a Bible-based, religious, faith-based reason for endorsing a particular candidate or a party or a piece of legislation or opposing those things or talking about those things, they're cleared to do it, and the IRS has agreed not to enforce those provisions of the Johnson Amendment against them. Now, this is a great start. My hope is this will erode the Johnson Amendment to a certain point where there will be enough political will to repeal it, because it should be repealed. The Trump administration tried to do that in 2017 during their first administration. They tried to get rid of the Johnson Amendment. My hope is this is going to be a great step for doing it. But here's my call to action. And even though I'm an attorney, this is not legal advice because I'm not talking to a specific church or a specific client when I say this. But now is the time to be bold. If you are a pastor that has been holding back, that has been muzzling yourself because you're afraid of losing tax-exempt status, my challenge to you would be move out now, be bold now. Don't allow the government to censor your speech from the pulpit. Don't allow the government to quench the spirit. Speak out on these things. Speak out based on biblical truth and biblical law, because the consequences of not doing that are too great, not only for your church and your own soul, but our society. We are seeing the chaos that sin is causing in our society as we are becoming completely unhinged from truth and from any sort of biblical moral standard, and we need to push back. So that is my call. Now is the time to be bold. Now is the time to get concessions from the IRS on these issues. Now is the time to push for a change in legislation so that the Johnson Amendment can be repealed and it won't be a temptation for pastors to muzzle themselves in the future. So there's no excuses. Now is the time to act. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. Take care. God bless.